in the industry there is a concern that people don't understand this, and we're going to have some reasonably, I don't know how to say this in a not cruel way, a modest death event, something the equivalent of Chernobyl, which will scare everybody incredibly to understand this stuff. We see the possibility. We're doing everything we can to hold this stuff and prevent it.
So, Google's former CEO, Dr. Eric Schmidt, just gave a mind-boggling interview at the SRI Forum. He gave some massive warnings about what AI is going to do with humans in the coming years. Watch this.
It'll be us plus computers working together. There are scenarios which we call artificial superintelligence, which I can talk about, where that might actually change. But at least for the foreseeable future, it's going to be us and computers. And both the first book and now this book are fundamentally about what does it mean for human identity to be working with an intelligence that is higher than ours in some areas and not as high in others. And we collectively believe that the industry is bringing the stuff forward faster than governments, society, civil society can adapt it. You see this, that I can assure you that the people who invented social media, who were largely liberal people from San Francisco, did not anticipate the polarization globally that social media has allowed, because it allowed you to find your friends.
Right. So
and if you're in the narrowing of your society. And the algorithmic boosting that started roughly in 2015 in the various tech companies is shown to be at least correlated, not necessarily causing, but correlated with a rise in mental illness among teenagers, especially teenage girls. There's lots of evidence, or at least correlation of that. Right. So again, when we were all inventing this stuff 20, 30 years ago, it never occurred to any of this. Now, Henry would say, in his German voice, this is because you didn't take any of those classes. And I said, yes, I was too busy programming, right? So his position, which is what the book to some degree was about, was that the solutions to that are not to let the tech bros make these decisions. Sorry for the stereotype, but it's true, that this requires a concerted effort. So the reason we wrote the book was as a call out to say, we need interdisciplinary teams, people who understand history, right, who've not had charmed lives, who understand how people are victimized, especially women and children. And all of that as part of the conversation. What are the appropriate guardrails in those things? AI is both, the benefits of AI are so profound, let me just list them. Curing every disease. I have one group that has decided that in 2 years they can define all human druggable targets. Now, that's a pretty big deal, right? And then the drug industry would then try to drug those targets. And we'll see if they can do it, but at least they're ambitious. Right, that's a Nobel Prize achievement if they manage to do it. We'll see if they can.
Or multiple.
There are many, many things in biology. Yeah. Biology is to AI the way math is to physics, right? In the sense that biology is so complicated, you're going to need AI to interpret it, and that's sort of what's going on. Another way to say it for biology is that sequence prediction, which is what, again, ChatGPT is. Deep learning, the way these algorithms evolve is they take a sentence, they take a word out, and then they score whether they put the correct word back in. Any system of physics, math, biology, and so forth that is sequence-based is amenable to those techniques. Mm-hmm. And that's why, for example, AlphaFold and so forth did so well. It's a natural next use of essentially sequence prediction. So things like climate change. Climate change is still occurring, guys, and the development of new energy sources, materials, so forth, better carbon capture are all predate to that. I can just give you example after example.
In terms of what it can do.
And health is the obvious one. What about an AI doctor for the world? Somebody who works with the nurse practitioner. I was in Burma, and I was talking to the guide lady, and I said I didn't see any hospitals. She said, oh, we don't have any. And I go, well, what happens? I said, oh, well, somewhat, like if they're really sick. I said, oh, pause. And then she says, they walk into the woods and they die.
Very sad.
Again, it would never occur to me, but that's probably true for a large portion of the population of the world. Why can't we improve that? And the answer is, think about an AI doctor in their language that serves them. Teachers, right? AI, there's lots of evidence of excellent use of AI in the high end, but what about getting the average person's education up, again, in their language and at their level, right, to help the teachers in rural schools? Why do we not have these? All of these things are very powerful. On the negative side, I've worked with the aforementioned usual suspects to work on this question about AI safety, something, again,
Right.
you've looked at quite a bit. And the core problem today is bio and cyber. Cyber, because it's pretty obvious, right, that if you do enough reinforcement learning, you can eventually find a zero-day exploit, as they're called. So imagine if you have a super intelligence, it can find them all very quickly. We'll see if that happens. And in bio, it turns out it's relatively easy to take existing viruses and modify them so that the various solutions and detections don't work, and then they kill a lot of people. Now, thank goodness this has not happened yet. In the industry, there is a concern that people don't understand this.
Okay, so in the upcoming, Dr. Eric Schmidt compares the current AI situation to needing a modest death event like Chernobyl for people to be alerted to the risk. I guess it's a massive statement coming from a person who knows a thing or two about AI. Let's listen.
And we're going to have some reasonably, I don't know how to say this in a not cruel way, a modest death event, something the equivalent of Chernobyl, which will scare everybody incredibly to understand this stuff. We see the possibility. We're doing everything we can to hold this stuff and prevent it. But does it take a tragedy? I mean, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were a tragedy. That's what, and Henry did, as you know,
Right.
the early, and this is a RAND project, where they invented essentially mutual assured destruction, right, in the 1950s.
Nuclear. Yeah.
So we're going to have to go through some similar process, and I'd rather do it before the major event with terrible harm than after it occurs.
And because you sort of paint that there's both amazing goodness that can come and risk, and often the risk we talk about, and you talk about in your book, is how do we align these systems so that they reflect and protect human values. And also, I thought it was very compelling, the discussion about how productivity will improve, tremendous growth in society overall, but it could have very disruptive effects with regard to equity and balance in terms of opportunity for people and things like that. So maybe one last comment, then we'll take some questions with regard to what are things that can be done along the lines of what you described in the book for the strategy for how do we begin to bound this so that we get the benefit and minimize the risk.
So Henry and I traveled to China to meet with Xi to warn them. This is well before DeepSeek. And as a result, the US and China are having what are called track 2 discussions about this. They're hilarious because the Americans are all on the Zoom, kind of normal Americans, kind of disheveled. And the Chinese are all lined up in a row with their little ties, very organized, very precise. I guess it's how each side shows love to the other. I don't think I'm going to be a very good diplomat. And my co-author, Craig, leads this and does it very well.
Just as long as you don't have to eat shrimp with chopsticks, it's not peeled. I had that once when I was over in Beijing.
I think that the real question, first place, maybe this is why, again, I'm not a diplomat. To get the other side to give up something while you're in a race turns out to be really hard. I'll give you an example. One person said, I have an idea. I said, okay, what's your idea? What we're going to do is we're going to have a treaty where each side has a bomb that is on the power supply to the data center, and it can remotely detonate the bomb, not on the data center, but on the power to the data center whenever it's really upset. And I said, good luck, try that. So again, people are thinking about how do you create a situation. I published a piece with Dan Hendricks last week on superintelligence, which I hope you all get a chance to read. And just to finish, this is actually important, let me get it out. The industry believes that in the next little while, we're going to get to the point where we're going to not just have human scientists, but we're going to have AI scientists. So the industry believes that you'll have like 1,000 people at OpenAI and you'll have 100,000 AI scientists. Now, let's assume these AI scientists are as good as the humans or even better. And this is the slope of innovation. And I already told you it's a factor of 10 per year, which is mind-boggling. What happens when you add a million AI scientists? Presumably the slope goes like this, okay? Now, let's assume, for purposes of going with it, the US gets its act together, highly unlikely, and we're actually doing this. We have all the data centers and so forth, and we've just done this. And China is 6 months behind. Now, everyone here would say, no problem. 6 months, not very much. In network effect businesses, when the slope of growth is this, you never catch up, okay? So this means that when America gets to the point where something new that could completely destroy the country of China occurs, China would have a 6-month latency or more.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa, and obviously it's vice versa. So the first thing you conclude is that America should win the race for superintelligence. That's kind of obvious. But the real question is, how do you manage the global partnerships? And one obvious thing to do is say, well, what would China, in the scenario where we're ahead, what is the first thing China would do? The first thing is that they would try to steal the intellectual property. The second thing that they would do is try to modify the weights. That's called an adversarial attack. That might work. So let's say that they don't work, and we're nearing the point of total intellectual dominance, right? That we're building 1,000 Einsteins and 1,000 Leonardo da Vinci's much ahead of them. What are China's options? A preparatory attack, a preliminary attack. So you see in this logic, this is inherently destabilizing to world order. And this is a problem that Henry did not have. He used to, when he negotiated with the Soviets, what he would do is tell them how many missiles that they had in the beginning. Our classified information about their classified information, if you will.
So they knew what we knew.
So they knew, and the negotiations consisted of, well, you have 5,000 of those times this many kilotons, and that's too much, and we have less, but we have more kilotons, and so forth. Maybe we can reduce both numbers. Right. You can't have that conversation in a network effect business. But he told me one day that he went into the meeting, and they're sitting there, all the Soviets are here, and the Americans are here, and he's leading it, and he starts, and immediately they all start screaming at each other on the other side, and one guy is carried out on the Russian side. He was not cleared to know what the Russians were doing, that Henry was about to tell them, right? Just imagine any of that happening today.
So as we pivot to the questions, do you make a distinction between superintelligence and generalized intelligence?
Okay, so this next part is where Dr. Eric Schmidt claims we're 3 years away from AGI, and then he compares AGI to ASI, which is the most feared form of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, the term that's evolving.
AGI, right.
Yeah, the definition is evolving in the industry, and I should say, by the way, that I call this the San Francisco School. The San Francisco School believes that we'll get to the equivalent of something close to AGI within 3 to 4 years, which, if so, is a huge event. It's like even more important than the founding of Xerox PARC, excuse me.
But not by much, right? Just a little.
Yeah, I mean, PARC is really important, and that's the arrival of a superintelligence that is equal to the union of right. So superintelligence is something greater than that. It occurs when you take the union of everyone's intelligence and you say we're even smarter than that.
Okay, so in this part, Dr. Eric Schmidt makes a very interesting statement on AI versus the human mind. Watch this.
The question about misinformation. What is truth? There's more. When new information scales beyond known human information, and the question is a provocative question, aren't we creating reality?
So Henry was very interested in the Move 37 and AlphaGo. The Go game had been around for 2,500 years, and AlphaGo invented a move that had not been seen, or at least documented in human history, that worked and caused them to win the game.
Yeah, it's like game 2, right?
And he kept saying to me, is that an alien intelligence? I mean, what is that? Right, so I answered it by saying it's an algorithmic derivation of a particular path. That's not what he was looking for. He was looking for why did it occur there and not with humans. So with respect to the question of truth, at Google I answered this all day by saying I have no idea, but we know how to rank people's attempts at truth. As a scientist, I will tell you the reason science works is because of essentially the ability to falsify. So the moment anyone has a science result, everyone tries to see if they can falsify it. And if it's attacked enough times, then it's true. I remember learning about relativity, Einstein's relativity theory, and I thought this is the stupidest thing ever. So I talked to my graduate student friend who did it in physics. I use it every day. It works all the time. So in other words, Eric, you're wrong. So it sure looks like the way we understand truth in science is from repeatability, falsifiability, and so forth. With respect to speech, we're in a situation where people have lost track because the distinction between online and offline is going away because they live online and offline and it's quite seamless. They're losing perspective as to what is truth and what are the most important things in your life, your health, your family, the people around you, your safety, your immediate environment. We're sort of losing all of that.